Hey RATBAGGERS, it's Jade giving you a mid-game guide to Core Keeper. I've already done the start guide on showing you how to get past the first 5 bosses and what order, and this is part 2 now, getting you all the way to near the end game. That will be definitely a separate video, so no spoilers here about the very final bosses. This will guide you in what order you should take on the biomes like the Sunken Sea, Desert of Beginnings, the sub-biomes and the sub-bosses. With also a little bit more about the Aesios Wilderness. So filled with tips, hopefully it's going to help you. Do go and check out part 1 if you still need help or starting out. How I took on Glurch the Abominable Mass, Gorm the Devourer, Malagus the Corrupted, the Hideous Hive Mother, and Aesios the Sky Titan. And yeah, please leave a like if you find this video useful. Let's go. So in the first video I showed you the progression, where you should be going and what bosses you should be doing in order. Before we get on to the next stage, there's definitely worth shouting out about farming bosses. There's lots of unique drops the bosses have, some of them exclusively only available by killing the boss, but they won't have a low chance of dropping. So you're going to have to take on a lot of the bosses over and over again if you want to make sure you can get every piece of gear. Now of course, some of the bosses that I've already shown, they won't necessarily be worth farming if you got to this stage already. But that said, you can always increase things like your vitality as well as get experience points by taking them on. And at this point, if you reach this, you've probably got a good amount of coins now, so you can keep buying a lot of summoning idols, which cost 200 coins now. They reduced it from 500 recently. Also means you can set up more traps and just make light work of any of the bosses you come across. So if you didn't farm the bosses or didn't get drops that you're particularly looking for the first time you took on, definitely spend a bit of time taking on the bosses again. For sure, some of the gear won't necessarily be that useful to you unless you make a good effort to upgrade it, and we'll be talking about the upgrade bench soon. But there are definitely some standout items it's worth picking up. If you need help with this, go and check out the individual videos I've done for all of the starter bosses where you can see every single drop. But there's one side boss that I really want to talk about as it's a crossover with Terraria. Never stop killing slimes because they have a chance of dropping a crown idol, and this is a special Terraria crossover one. If you place this idol on any of the slime rooms you come across, it will summon King Slime. Glurch, the original slime boss, only had 2,500 health. This guy's got 24,000, but it's guaranteed to drop exactly the same items you're seeing right now. Whereas only a few of the items are always guaranteed to drop. Taking on any boss, you will always get these items. And the main one for me is getting a slime pet. Of course, every slime boss has a chance of dropping an egg when you defeat it, but this is a guaranteed chance that you get the royal oozy egg. And I pretty much prefer this over all the other slime pets and most of the other pets in the game. It's always going to be a choice about what kind of build you're going for, if you're playing with friends, what kind of weapons you're using. That is definitely going to affect what kind of pet you have. But for me, it's a big one because it does 30% damage against bosses when it hits. A lot of the other slime pets are going to have great buffs, things like stopping enemies from healing, which you get from the poison slime boss, which we'll talk about in a while. But I still think this is a good one, especially if you can get early on and then level it up. Some other nice stuff like royal gel as well, stopping enemies from moving and reducing it by 15%. And not as useful, the King Slime Crown, which has got extra armor, glow, critical hit chance and good health, but when you wear both of them, no slimes will hurt you. And at the moment, unless they patch it, you can use this method on all of the boss slimes. Controversial, I know, and I have done and shown you guys how to defeat all the slime bosses legit, but if you're using ranged weapons or magic, you can go ahead and just wail on any of the slime bosses you summon as long as you're wearing the crown as well as the royal gel. So I figure it's important to point this out if you're really looking to get a certain type of gear or build, especially some of the slime bosses dropping stuff like Ivy, and you don't mind a bit of cheesing, then you can absolutely do this. Of course, you will have to spend a lot of coins on the summoning idols anyway, and you will lose out on getting your vitality as well as any melee skills. But yeah, as of recording, pretty much September, it does work. You can use this method to take on slime bosses without them hurting you. You would have noticed that any chance you try hitting a slime with a melee weapon, it just simply won't do anything. So regardless if you're going to cheese or not, it's still a good idea to take on King Slime as your first boss now you've gone and defeated Aesios, as the Aesios Wilderness also has Ivy. That's obviously one of the poisonous slime bosses, which you can use a scanner to go ahead and find. The King Slime does do a fair amount of damage if it does hit you, so it won't be an easy fight, but certainly if you're prepared and you're used to fighting Glurch, the same methods apply. Get rid of any slime around, make sure you've got something pretty fast moving, and just take care to avoid his minions, which he'll summon lots of. So with the hologram pod that you could now get by putting Malagus's crystal or heartstone in his statue, you'll now be able to place down the hologram pod, and it's basically an NPC that will give you the chance to craft the scanners to find not only the optional slime bosses but the story bosses. And a reminder, there should be a waypoint teleport stone near every boss that isn't moving around, so make sure you try and find that before you do go and take on Ivy. So I won't dawdle too much more on the slime bosses. Like I said, I've done individual guides and one talking about it. But yes, Ivy does do poison damage, which stops you from healing, especially if you walk over the slime puddles or you get hit by her directly, as well as obviously doing a lot of damage to you. So the trick is, again, to make sure you remove any of the slime, just like all the slime bosses, before you try and engage. Don't get too close, and then wail on it with range, or make sure you've got some sort of dash ability to get out of the way when she pounces on you. If you're looking for a poison build, then these are the ones you want to farm, as you've got a good chance of getting her harness, as well as, I do believe, the legs. Not to mention Ivy's ring, but you can get Ivy's ring from other places too. This is also the boss that you want to farm if you're trying to get the next Warlock set, the Corrupted set. And definitely look out for Ivy's ring, as that makes you immune to any of the poison. So if you really want to farm up and look for lots of Scarlet ore, then it's really handy, especially when you come across the slimes. And something I didn't maybe cover enough in the last video, where I was focused on just the boss progression, is talking a little bit more about the biomes. And you have got the mole dungeon inside the Aesios Wilderness. This can be a pretty tough place to come. You probably won't have mining damage enough to break through the walls, so you've just got to find an opening. It takes a pretty dedicated effort to get enough mining damage. It's filled with tentacles, just like you'll find in the Sunken Sea, and these guys can be pretty deadly too. The worst thing though probably is the slowing you down. It stacks up to 10 times, and being in this toxic cloud is pretty much doing that. So rip to dodging out the way. If you get a wave of these come at you, yeah, it could be trouble. There are some really unique stuff that you can get from here. It's the only place you can get the Ferromoth pet, find in some of the moth chests, as well as the mold armor, which basically protects you against the slowness. There's no big boss, or mini boss I should say. It's just about dealing with all these guys and hopefully not getting overcome by the slowness. I will also be speaking a lot about armor sets you get from bosses, but just give you a quick heads up, the Wild Warden set, which is good for basically Beastmaster builds, where you can be focusing on your pets, not your minions, doing more damage. That can be earned a lot by exploring the Aesios Wilderness, as well as any ancient chests that you might find. And as always, make sure you bring a musical instrument, just in case you find any of these doors to hopefully open up, as there's pretty good loot in some of them. Or yes, a drill and a generator can do the job. Okay, moving on from the Aesios Wilderness to the Sunken Sea, a gorgeous biome filled with this coral wood, which you'll need for a lot more advanced gear. It's a pretty wide open area, especially with the water, and that means we're going to need a boat. If you are mining the beach blocks, you're going to need mining damage over 382 to do it in 5 hits. The two crops you're looking here for are pine grapple as well as pupaya. When cooked, the pine grapple will give you health regen, but more importantly, extra physical melee damage, 22%. The pupaya gives even more health regen, 6.3 compared to like the 5 and something percent for the actual pine grapple, and it does give you extra range damage, again 22%. I'm going to have a much bigger section talking about golden plants and rare foods, which will cover the extra bonuses you get from all of these foods we're talking about. So that's what you're really looking for while exploring the beaches, as you hunt down Omoroth, the next boss, or maybe Morpha, the slime boss. And there is the Atlantean sea worm as well, which is another optional boss that you'll definitely need a boat to take on. In fact, you're probably going to need a boat for 2 of them, so let's talk about crafting the different boats. So you go ahead and make the boat crafting station once you've unlocked the Scarlet crafting bench. And then you've got 2 types of boat that you can actually make. A steady boat, which you will need Scarlet bars, mechanical parts and planks. And then you've got a speedier boat, which needs a lot more resources. The octarine, which is going to be the ore that you're digging for in the Sunken Sea, and lots of the coral wood planks. Difference is noticeable. The speeder will go about 30% more than the regular, but I don't think it's necessarily needed, and there are some things you can do to speed up boating. Specifically the coral ring, which gives you an increase in boat speed, so you can find that in a lot of the areas you'll be exploring while in the Sunken Sea. Not to mention octarine locked chests. You've also got a good chance of finding boats at certain fishing villages in the Sunken Sea too. So always worth having 2, one on you in your hotbar, and obviously one that you're going to be utilising, because if you die, then obviously your boat will be left there. Sunken Sea can be pretty dangerous. You've got these tentacles that can appear, you've got these variants that can hurt you if you get too close, and then ranged ones that can fire at you. If you're in the slow moving boat, you should be able to just about avoid them as long as you're kind of going full speed. The blue slimes you come across can do the slippery damage, so that's something you want to try and avoid, as it can make you move in all sorts of different directions, which means you won't be able to dodge efficiently from any enemies. And you saw there we've got the crab that fires the bubbles. These can do a max of up to 180 damage, so it's well worth trying to avoid them, as well as obviously applying the slippery if you do get hit by the bubbles. Eventually you will be able to find gear though that nullifies the slippery movement effect. So get used to this biome, explore as much as you can, digging up lots of the octarine so you can make and craft any of the new octarine gear. Obviously the crafting bench is going to be essential, and then it's time to go and explore all of the ruins that you can find, as well as hunt down the bosses. You'll more than likely come across some of the ancient cities. These are filled with the Cavelin scholars that can do quite a bit of magic damage, but more chance for you picking up the scholar staff as well as some of the sorcerer armour. Not to mention these golem type creatures that can fire at you. They're sentinels and yeah, they're pretty tough. In terms of loot, you will find a good amount, especially with lots of pots to destroy, but more importantly you might find a vending machine in one of these places. It's well worth clearing it out and seeing if you can find one. There'll be multiple locations like this in the Sunken Sea, so it might take a while to find exactly what you're looking for. But it's a vending machine that sells special food items that can be really powerful as long as you've got enough coins to buy them. You also can get one of the cards completing the full set for a very special item again later. So obviously take it back to your base with you, and yeah, there's lots of bookcases and decorative items that I really like in this area. You can get some super buffs as well as some accessories and another one of the cards that I mentioned from this place. 65 max health for 10 minutes, tentacle jerky gives huge knockback, massive critical hit damage with some of these foods, definitely well worth it. So next up we got morpha, the aquatic mass, and again same thing as always, clear out any of the actual slime on the floor, and then this one it's a bit more ranged effort. The bubbles can cause the slippery effect, and then if she jumps on you it does quite a lot of damage. Morpha here has got 84,000 health, so definitely tanky. Now the bubbles do spread far and wide, but she doesn't actually summon as any minions like some of the other slime bosses. You've got a good chance of picking up pieces of the sorcerer set from Morpha, so if you like doing magic damage, that's definitely going to be the next set up after, I guess, the soaring. And although they're both level 13, I consider the sorcerer set better than the scholar set. You get much more protection, you get much more magic damage. The only thing that the scholar set is better with is facing off against bosses. Anyhow, you've got a chance of picking up the sorcerer stuff from this boss, as well as a bunch of accessories that would be useful. You can also pick up the slime armor set too. You can get a chance of getting these from killing blue slimes, but otherwise it's from morpha too. And yeah, it's really good for hitting and giving slippery movement and making you immune to it. Do go and watch my slime boss guide for lots of details about all the slime bosses. As you explore in the Sunken Sea, pay attention to look out for the seashells on the floor, just like you found with the Aesios feathers. Dig them up, as you need 20 of them to make the scanner to find omoroth. For the summoning item, you are going to need the fishing NPC, so put the chum crafting table down and he should spawn. That's obviously what you get from defeating Aesios. Especially important as you're going to need purple bait from him unless you find other places, as that's what's needed for the summon item. It's called an expert lure and it needs a bunch of other bait which are easy to make at a bait bench, just needing some simple crops like bomb berries, heartberries and more, as well as 30 octarine bars. If you have come across one of the fishing villages, it will also have a nice selection of baits, meaning you won't have to craft as much, but they're not that hard to get. The purple lure is probably the toughest one, but that only costs some coins buying it from the fishing trader. So if you use the scanner, you found omoroth and you've got your expert lure, then put it in your offhand slot to summon him. Then go ahead and use your fishing rod and out he should pop. A few seconds later and omoroth will pop up. Now it's a pretty tough boss. There is a way that you can do this, as you can see my friend Erico is helping me by doing it on land. There are these small little islands that you can stand on. As long as you're quick and versatile or got enough health, you can hopefully avoid them. But if he does get pretty close to you, a lot of the whirlwinds will hit you at once, and that can mean pretty much certain death, as well as these tentacles. These tentacles are also probably some of the biggest dangers. Make sure you take them out whenever they spawn. Don't want to be warped into them. For sure, the tentacles are what you want to avoid even more than whirlwinds, but as you can see, even that's tough. As usual, there will be a waypoint nearby, so make sure you find it. And pretty much, yeah, stay in your boat. You won't necessarily need the speedy one. I think as long as you're adept at using range gear at this point, as a melee build just really isn't the best one, then you can either hop from island to island or stay in the boat and do as much range damage or magic damage as you can. Keeping well away from the tentacles and trying to avoid the whirlwinds as much as possible. There is an element where you could potentially dig a long way away from Omoroth once you first spawn him in, like dig yourself almost a trench, and that can work especially if you put a lot of bridges on it, giving you just a bit more space to run around. I'm going to do a proper video on this guy to show you ways to defeat him. But Omoroth is one of the story bosses. You can't complete Core Keeper completely until you've taken him out. Give you some context and scale, Asios the Sky Titan has 31,000 health, this guy has over 90,000. So you really will have to spend some time making sure you're getting plenty of upgraded gear and exploring many of the ancient cities that you find in the Sunken Sea to get better stuff. And cooking as much of the pupaia as possible so that you can have lots of range damage. You will also get your second soul power from defeating Omoroth, which gives you a 3% chance of spawning in a tornado when you hit an enemy, but only with a ranged hit. So, Morpha Mass Scanner is the slime boss that you can find in Sunken Sea. I've shown you how to cheese that. That's easily crafted and found. The Atlantean Worm Scanner, that is something you're going to need solarite bars, which you can only get once you move into the Crystal Realms, or the Shimmering Frontier as it should be called. I definitely recommend taking on Morpha before you venture forward to the Desert Beginnings, the next biome. So the Desert Beginnings is a pretty tough area. It's very open and wide, just like the Sunken Sea, but this time you don't have to worry about water. Now you can go ahead and unlock a bunch of dune buggies that will get you around this part of the biomes much quicker, but they are pretty much a death trap. You can't fire any weapons when you're riding in them, and I found them just not as useful as maybe making sure you've got a good speed build. They're also ridiculously expensive to go ahead and craft and make. You can find old ones scattered around, maybe an ancient race course if you're really lucky, but I would say they're not worth your time. What we're looking here for is them red little skulls. These are scarab shells. Basically, you need these to go ahead and fight the next boss. It does require a bit of grinding, much like some of the other items like Asios feathers or the seashells. You're going to have to just keep running around, hopefully find or see some on the floor, and then dig them up with either your spade or your hoe. The enemies in this biome are really tough because you can't really get away from them as much. The scarabs can obviously blow up and they do a lot of damage to you, as well as the cavelins that fire off poisonous little daggers. So high speed, like I said, with your food so you can move around and get away, and looking out as much as possible for galaxy ore. To destroy any of the desert blocks in 5 hits, you're going to need a mining score of over 525. If you really are having trouble digging this up, you haven't been lucky enough to find one of the scarlet drills, remember there are certain foods, fishes that you can actually get that increase your mining score, but absolutely you will need some of the best pickaxes as soon as you're able to craft a galaxite pickaxe. With the right buffs and maybe the right gear, your octarine pickaxe should be good enough, but yeah, you definitely want to move on or get something better just to make everything quicker. Now you don't normally have this many scarabs following you at once, this is from the boss fight, but just to illustrate how dangerous they can be. If you don't hit them up enough in time, they will explode, and after a certain amount of damage they will explode. So that's your time to really dodge out of the way. Once you've done enough damage, hopefully you can get away before the explosion hits you. As you get stronger, you'll hopefully be able to take them out before they explode. The Desert Beginnings has 2 distinct sort of sub-biomes. You've got the lava areas where you'll find another slime boss eventually. These especially can be tricky to navigate with the lava butterflies that can do quite a bit of burning damage. Not to mention the lava actually having quite high health, again doing more damage to you. Yeah, you will need either lots of blocks or bridges to get through the lava rivers to make it through some of these dungeons. There is also a very special place you need to find if you're trying to make one of the best pickaxes in the game, the Soul Seeker. I've only got a fresh picture of this because I've not found it yet in my most recent playthrough. But this is the ancient forge that eventually you'll need to make the Soul Seeker, which I'm going to do a separate video talking about all the legendary tools and weapons, but basically it is the best pickaxe in the game. So you got a chance of finding that, or Ignous, the slime boss in the lava zones, otherwise they're known as the molten quarries. Anyway, you can reduce fire damage if you found anything like that, and there is certain fish you can eat that will give you protection against fire damage as well. So bring your fishing rod and dip it literally into the lava and you hopefully be able to catch some of them. They're called verdant dragonfish and they're the ones you want to find. They'll give you protection for burning damage for 10 minutes, so really useful for exploring all of the molten quarries. What I like using here is the Galaxite chakrams. These can bounce off the walls, especially in these tight corridors. They can be really good for taking on a lot of enemies. Ignous is a pretty tough boss fight. Unlike a lot of the other slime bosses, he has a self-healing mechanic. Eventually, he'll spawn some molten rocks that will go towards him, and if they reach him, he'll basically heal. So if you're refusing to do the cheese, or you just don't want to, you will need to make sure you get rid of all the lava, or go ahead and make sure you pick up the fish. Maybe fill in any gaps with bridges or floors around the arena before you start attacking him. And pay close attention to these rocks. You do need to destroy them, otherwise it would simply take forever to go ahead and kill him. A good actual creature here is absolutely the slime pet. It's probably the one exception I've said to having the other pet that gives 30% damage, as that will stop it healing by 75% when it hits. Or at least it's got a chance of doing that. But now I've explained the cheese, I can't see why anyone would really not utilise it. It's up to you how much you really view these things as cheating or not. But if it's in the game and the devs haven't patched it yet, then I think it's fair game. But Ignous will do a ton of damage if he hits you, as well as all the fire damage that you can obviously take when you're running around. Not only can you pick up the magma set, which gives you protection against damage and increases your burn damage, so really makes you good if you're using the magic fireball stave. You've got a chance of picking up the grim armor set, which is again the next kind of upgrade in the warlock class. And you do need to defeat this guy if you want to try and craft the actual Soul Seeker pickaxe, as you'll need the parchment special summoning item. And an absolute ton of the different bars that you can get around the world, including 800 Galaxite, Octarine and Scarlet bars. So yeah, not the easiest. I wouldn't really bother with the slime pet that you get from Ignous. He's pretty much useless. He does 15% damage against bosses, so like some of the other creatures, but it's not really that great because he only adds a little to glow as his other effect. Kind of hoping they change him and give him some sort of protection against fire damage, or does fire damage. And just like a lot of the late game areas, you will find special dungeons and mazes that contain really high end loot. You need quite a high mining skill to really go through like I am, otherwise you'll have to find the entrance to some of these places. Filled with poisonous traps and turrets. They can offer some unique loot, especially certain armor pieces that you can get that enhance your powers that you get from souls. You basically need to find 3 special items that will unlock special chests, but that's for another video taking a look at legendary items. But for sure, if you come across one of these, don't pass up the opportunity to get to the core, find this little maze and get the loot inside. And of course, finishing off with the desert beginnings and the boss, Raka. Yes, I know his name's Akar, but I just call him Raka. So this guy, we're going to need the thumper, and you can buy it from the hologram. As mentioned, the scanner for it does require 40 of the scarab shells, so good luck finding them. Thumper itself, 30 scarlet, 30 galaxite, 10 mechanical, 20 ancient gemstones and some fibre and planks. So this is one of the few bosses that you will need to summon it the first time. Just place the thumper down inside its arena. This can be quite a challenging boss fight. It's got over 160,000 health, and effectively this gives you the opportunity to get pieces of Rakar's armour, which is the evolution of Thorn's armour, which you would have got from taking on the Hive Mother. It does also offer some of the best magical items, especially accessories, and a unique magical sword. Things like the Soul Lantern will speed up your minion's attack speed, as well as the puppet ring, and the sword itself transfers your magic bar into direct attack damage. So the more magic you've got, the more damage you'll be able to do with it, and it's called a Zealot Scimitar. So I'm going to be looking at that again, part of the legendary weapon set. And the last notable thing you need from this guy is a chance of it dropping something called the Giant Bug Brain. This is how you can craft a special workbench, which you're going to need to go ahead and find the Hydras and summon them. You know, you might have come across them moving underground as you explore either the Aesios, the desert, as well as the Sunken Sea. That will be coming in my end game video for sure. But if you've been wondering how you can actually summon and fight them, then you need to fight Raka and get that Bug Brain. Now fighting him is tough. He does summon these triangles that do a huge amount of damage and home in on you, and then lots of scarabs. It's best advised that you either place a ton of traps to at least do some damage the first time he spawns. You could try setting up a bunch of turrets that you might have picked up while exploring certain parts of the Forgotten Ruins and more. But your best bet is to build small little pillars, about 4 maybe wide, in different areas around the arena so that you can move around them, or you're simply going to have to keep heading to the exit to avoid the triangles and everything else. The triangles can follow you quite a bit, so you need to just basically have them hit one of the pillars, and the scarabs can leave the actual arena. Obviously the whirlwinds, the desert storms that it summons as well are no joke, but that's how you can see I'm trying to dodge triangles. If you haven't got the best range build, then you are going to need stuff that can just tank hits. And for sure you will need some sort of dash item like Asios's feather, or maybe the rift lens which I've shown in the previous video, so you can teleport and basically avoid them. If you go too far, Raka will start respawning all of its health, and obviously if you die it will go away and disappear completely if you're not close enough to respawn. So it's definitely one of them you don't want to mess up, since it does cost a fair bit to go ahead and make the thumper. At this stage of the game you should be trying to aim to get as many rare foods as possible, and anything that's going to give you speed. I obviously died there, but I did finally manage to get in the killing blow. For sure try and set up a bed relatively close by, but be warned, scarabs can chase you out and blow it up. Another decent one which you could use shack rooms, but again I think range is absolutely the way to go. And the soul power that you get actually gives you a 5% chance of spawning the same little triangle orbs that will go and hunt down an enemy. So a tough boss fight for sure. And that's pretty much where we're going to leave it at the moment until the endgame guide, where I'll definitely be going over the Shimmering Frontier. I was going to include it in this one, but I do feel like it is still an endgame activity. You do need really high health to go into the Shimmering Frontier, and the gear that you get in there is definitely something you have to work hard for. Basically, the Shimmering Frontier you can find in Asios Wilderness, the Sunken Sea and the Desert of Beginnings, but it is around 1200 blocks from the core, so it is quite far out, but you'll find it in pockets. To destroy one of the crystal blocks in 5 hits, you're going to need a mining damage of over 725, so unless you find an entrance in, you more than likely might not even be able to enter some of these places until you can get that mining damage up, which requires a lot more progression through the game, especially in places like the Asios Wilderness. And it does look like it is a buffer between the last biome and the rest that I've mentioned, basically the passage. But before we go, I do want to give you just some end game tips and talking about other stuff, like how important it is to start, keep or grow your crops and get some of your other skills up. I've said it in so many of my other guides, but please don't stop trying to grow any crops. The faster you can get up to the level where you'll start getting the gold crops, the better. Now the talent for this is Expert Gardener, and you will find it giving you a 3 to 15% chance for seeds planted by the player to grow into golden plants with improved effects, as goes the wiki. Now you'll notice when you've cooked foods, you have gained some rare foods. So rare foods and golden crops are different. There can be chances that you'll gain some rare foods just by cooking and utilising some of your cooking skills, so again it's something you should never really stop doing even if you've already made 200 meals. Because again, it's really important to get bigger and better buffs from the food you eat to have any chance of taking on the end game bosses, as well as some of these medium ones. I do believe it gives you 1 experience point to grow 1 plant. In fact, it's the harvesting of a plant that gives you that 1 experience. So by that logic, it is going to take you up to 6,602 plants to go ahead and get fully maxed out gardening. Now there are some caveats with that will give you boosts in some of that experience. Anytime you harvest any kind of plant, whether or not you can cook with it or not, that also gives you experience. And to get to level 80, where you'll get the Expert Gardener skill, you're still going to need 3,776 experience. So it really is important that you set up some good farms, and yeah, just don't stop. Obviously set up automation, make sure you've got plenty of sprinklers, it's well worth the investment. And likewise with cooking, to get the best meals and get even more out of your meals, you really do need to cook a ton of them. I don't want to go on too much about this, it definitely deserves a separate video looking at skills and which ones are the best. But where I kind of rushed because I knew quite a big part of the game and didn't maybe focus on some of this stuff, I ended up getting to a point where I just felt quite weak by the time I took on some of the endgame bosses, and I had to go back and spend more time trying to grow more crops or just using so many more potions than I would have originally. The perks that you get from a lot of the golden plants are really massive. They really give you extra bonus damage or extra health, extra speed, and they're just definitely worth getting as much as possible. And then likewise when you cook with them and get more chance of getting rare foods, then they're always going to give you more buffs as well. There are a ton of other skills that are worth focusing on as well. You've got things like thorny damage, which gives more critical hit, or maybe not as good, the poison coated weapons, which stops enemies from rehealing. Thorny Skin, which directly gives you, again, more thorn damage. So particularly if you're going for a thorns build, it's important you build this up. And then you've got Expert Gardener, which will obviously give you what I said. And then the Potent Poison, which does extra damage against poison targets. So I would focus my points on the Expert Gardener. Of course, once you reach the cap of 100, you can't put any more points into anything. So you've only got 25 points you can put in. So it is possible to go ahead and get Expert Gardener as well as Potent Poison. But for this to really work, you need a poison build, and you do need the coated weapons to really make more sense out of it. And the one you're looking out for with food is Master Chef, giving you more chance for additional food gained from cooking to be rare. So with a lot of the upgrades that you're going to need a ton of coins. So you can sell your crops, but even better, craft them into food first and then sell the excess. You might only need 100 or 200 of each kind of crop. Make them into potions, make it into food, and sell that to the trader. That way you're getting your crafting skill up or your cooking skill up. Right, moving on to crafting and the upgrade bench. Obviously with the Scarlet, you're now able to unlock the upgrade station as well as the distillery table. These two items are really key. The distillery bench, of course, you're going to get more powerful potions, 40% health, and 5-second cooldown on the great healing ones. And it allows you to convert all of that ground slime into regular slime. So a great way to do that is by taking on Ivy, maybe saving your idols for that, since you'll obviously generate a bunch more of the slime in and around and plenty of other mobs there. Reduced damage from bosses is pretty handy too. And then it's the upgrade station. Obviously this is how you can make some of your early game weapons if you really like the effects in them or what they do, how you can keep them at a relevant level. But it's incredibly expensive. It really does have to be something special that you really love using to carry on upgrading. My chakrams here are level 14, so if I want to get to level 15, give me extra 9 physical damage and an extra 2% critical hit chance, it's going to cost me 28 solarite bars and 365 ancient coins. So it can cost a huge amount of ancient coins to go ahead and bring a low level item all the way up, hence why it's not really recommended. Try and find natural weapons instead that will do more damage and maybe upgrade them. I upgraded my arcane staff to level 18 and it cost a huge amount. It is powerful, but I'm not 100% sure it's still better than something else I might have found later. At a certain point you will need the gems to go ahead and upgrade to the max level. Level 16 you need jungle emeralds, level 17 you're going to need the ocean sapphires, and level 18 desert rubies. The final level is level 19 at the moment, which is the Pandemonium bars, which you can only go ahead and get from the passage. Now these jewels, I thought they dropped from certain bosses and areas that you'd find, like the Desert Beginnings, Asios Wilderness, but actually they're more rewards that you get for completing some of the special dungeons that you find in the Shimmering Frontier. Basically they can drop from alien tech biome, which you'll find inside the Shimmering Frontier. I'll talk more about these in the endgame guide, but if you have been wondering why you can't find any of these to go ahead and max upgrade, you do need to spend just more time in the Shimmering Frontier, killing any of the Mimites, breaking down sun crystals, or especially taking on the alien tech sub-biome. Best way to get them right now though is by completing the passage, as that gives you a lot of drops inside chests you'll find as exploring and taking on the final boss. I don't want to talk too much more about that because that's a bit too spoilerish. You will also get these as guaranteed drops from killing the Hydras. So ultimately I wouldn't really go ahead and upgrade anything below level 10 for sure. It would really have to be a special item that you find good. You can upgrade your accessories though, and it might well be worth upgrading things like your lantern or your bags just to give you some extra bonuses. You can literally boost up the speed if you've got something like the Pearl Lantern by going ahead and upgrading it, as well as how much mana it gives you. Maybe only a few levels, but still. So stuff like that, yep, absolutely. Accessories that you're going to use for ages, like my Rift Lens here. You can boost up the magic damage for this, so I actually think that's worth it. And any favourite accessories that you know are pretty OP. Wood farms give you more than just wood. If you set it up the right way with conveyor belts, you can see all the stuff that has been stocked up. Picked up a ton of Wild Warden pants here too. There's already been a billion guides talking about automation and how important it is for some of this stuff, but for sure it's definitely worth doing. You don't have to go over complex with it. And when it comes to mob farming, that is something again I'm about to start doing now. It all just depends on your mileage out of stuff. Yes, you got more chance of certain items dropping from mobs, so high level mobs it's worth farming. I wouldn't necessarily set up mob farmers though for the first 3 or 4 biomes. only because it takes quite a bit of time, and although you do get a bunch of gear, early game stuff maybe, and items and drops that you can maybe go and sell or make some use of, I still think it's better to just go and explore the game, as that way you get more experience with combat as well. I've completed all bosses at this stage, what you're looking at right now, and this is about as far as I got with mob farming. In fact, I'm pretty under-leveled, so I do know I did complete the game before, and I have brought over some of the stuff from my old world, so that definitely gave me a big boost. So yeah, if you really like that side of things, go ahead and start setting up complex mob farms where hopefully you get the mobs to kill each other with the help of some turrets and traps that you might put down. But I don't think you absolutely need to set them up if you don't want to, it's just not your bag. But yeah, that's the idea. Similar to cooking and farming, crafting is a skill you want to get increased. If you're trying to generate lots of coins and you've got excess amount of things like copper and tin, don't go and simply sell your ingots over to a trader. Instead, make stuff. Whether it's a ton of accessories using all of your bars, then go and sell the accessories themselves, as then that boosts your crafting skill. Particularly, you want to get to Jewelry Crafter. This gives you a percentage chance to get polished versions of items. If you manage to get a polished item, it doesn't just go ahead and buff the item, it also adds a new ability. So this gold crystal ring, 17.3 physical range damage, polished version, 19.9 physical range damage, 3.9 range attack speed. So the quicker you get up to crafting, the quicker you can start crafting all of these accessories and hoping to get some new benefits and bonuses on some of your older gear. And of course, anything excess, you can either go ahead and dismantle if you're really desperate, but again, you're better off going ahead and selling it so you've got plenty of coins to upgrade more gear. Just a little FYI, if you do go ahead and upgrade any gear, if you dismantle it, you won't get the resources that you put into it back, or not even half. Only the resources that you might have got from the original item before it was upgraded. By the time you get to the Octarine workbench, you can go ahead and get the proficient jewelry workbench, which gives you even more options with your accessories to hopefully get better versions of. And at this stage, if you've been playing a lot, you might have a lot of resources you can spend on portals. If not, you can use the cheesy method which I've shown off, starting up new worlds and digging up the waypoints near Glurch, as he's easy to find. You only need 850 mining skill, well, only, that's quite a lot, but you can achieve it with a mid-game build. Otherwise, bring 3 or 4 drills with you, and they should do the trick as well. The Fury Forge is your next upgrade, after obviously you got whatever you needed with the smelter, the stage 2 one, to craft your gold, your scarlet and your octarine. This is how you're going to make your galaxite, your solarite and the pandorium. And if you're a magic user, make sure you absolutely get the pearl lantern, as it gives you mana every second and additional movement speed. Not to mention the octarine bag, which increases your magic barrier as well. And then galaxite, then obviously you get a chance to make the turrets. This is why again it might be worth waiting until you start doing big efficient mob farming, because you go ahead and buy it or craft a bunch of these. They'll fire flames out projectiles killing enemies. It's also where you can work and get the go-kart workbench. But as I said earlier, the primitive one's cheap enough, but the renegade and the speeder, that is a lot of galaxite bars you'll need. Not to mention mechanical parts too, and they just don't handle very well and leave you too open to getting hurt. In the advanced crafting table for accessories, you can also get the coral amulet, which gives you 11% boat speed. So that's another item you can use if you're going to just craft the chunky one. One of my favourite rings is the magnetic ring. I use that alongside my farming gear, and again if I have set up any mob farms. So lots of good stuff with the rest of the accessories, giving either critical hit damage, thorns damage, melee and range, just depending on what you want. And again, polished versions of these should give extra bonuses. When it comes to armour and weapons, I haven't really spoken a lot about certain armours that you'll find as rewards just by killing mobs in some of the biomes, with more of a focus on the drops you get from bosses, because it's going to be so random about what you get. And with so many different armour sets, it really does need special separate videos where I take a look and give you advice about what are the best range gear sets or what are the best melee builds. But what I found is generally a lot of this stuff that you can craft, especially with the armour, just isn't necessarily worth it, as you always find something comparable, usually better. It's just a case of finding all the pieces to it. There's always going to be some exceptions, and if you've got plenty of resources, then why not test it out? But particularly though, I do like the galaxite chakrams. Definitely feels like if you're just pure melee build, definitely some of these arm sets might be really worth your time. And there we go, that's a really long video, but that's how much mid-game there is in Core Keeper. As said, I've left a ton out because it just deserves to be in separate videos, so look out for them and tell me what you really need help with. I am going to try and get my end game absolutely done as quickly as I can now, so look out for that video as well, unless you don't like to see spoilers, and I'll see you RATBAGGERS for more Core Keeper guides soon. Bye bye.